So I'm talking about individuals with acquired brain injury, and primarily I'm thinking about people who have had a traumatic brain injury, but it's a broader to ABI. And my colleagues are listed there. Are one of them in particular underlined. Krista is wherever I can look, so I'm looking into Canada. She stayed up late tonight to hear this presentation, and any statistical questions you have will go directly to Krista. But anyway, I'm telling you about the project that we're involved in. But beforehand, why am I even involved in this? Well, I started life as a speech language therapist and ended up specialising in traumatic brain injury rehabilitation. And then I became a lecturer at Canterbury University in that field. And after a while, I then joined ACC and got a funder perspective. So can you see here, I'm pointing out that I've seen this issue as a clinician, I've seen it as an educator, a funder, then a student, and then later on as an inTRAI fellow. And now I had this opportunity to develop this assessment for people with an acquired brain injury. So why are we worried about it and you're concerned about it in New Zealand? So ABI, which includes traumatic, there's about 40,000 incidents per year, although estimates vary. And definitely it's more important if you're older. And then if you look at stroke, there's about 9,000 per year. That's the stroke Aotearoa says. And again, it's more important if you're older. So this is not a small issue. So what were we trying to do, or what are we trying to do, or what have we achieved is really what I should be saying, because we're at the end of the research project, and I'm going to tell you the results today. So the research project was to design a new ABI-specific inTRAI assessment tool. And what we had going for it was we had inTRAI assessment expertise, and we also had HERO, which is the Head Injury Rehabilitation Ontario, who they are the experts in their field in that part of the world. So the idea was to confirm, as you can see, that the assessment is useful and appropriate. We wanted it validated and obviously doing the things it's meant to do, and then ensure that its psychometric properties met the standard. I don't need this. I don't know why I'm holding it. There we go. So our target population, primarily adults 16 to 55, moderate to severe ABI, and outside of the acute phase. That's fairly standard for the people who were being served by HERO. So we excluded some people, and not only did we have our participants, because this is at the very first pilot stage, not only do we have those participants across 14 sites, but of course inTRAI Canada has got, just like inTRAI New Zealand has a whole database of people who we already knew had a brain injury from their home care assessments. So by June 2026, we wanted the scoping and literature review completed, and really the first four as where we're up to now. We've got an ABI-specific inTRAI assessment developed. It's been tested, or currently being tested and validated. And the last meeting was HERO said that they felt it was in a good enough state to implement. And then the next plan, of course, will be to publish these results and disseminate them. So far, looking at the scope of what was available, there was no real assessment that provided the value that inTRAI does, given that we are collecting data and at the same time providing decision support for assessors. There was nothing in that field. We've got a picture of what the stakeholders want. And we knew that the home care assessment works, but it wasn't complete. So rather than developing a whole new assessment, it looked like we just needed to fill in the gaps that were specific to this population. And we've come up with a home care assessment and an ABI supplement. It has 14 items, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. We've written a draft manual, because as everybody knows, the form only gives you the titles of the items. It doesn't tell you the intent, the definition, the process, and the response coding. Well, the form might as well. And when in the pilot, it was only about 15 extra minutes or 15 minutes to complete the supplement for that particular group. So what's in this supplement? So this is an overview of what's covered. I'm not giving you the exact items. There's still some playing around with some wording, but they were, of the items, there was 4 added in the mental status area. Not surprising to those of you who know the brain injury rehabilitation world: insight, unpredictable mood and behaviour, the issues with excessive naivety, and some self-injury behaviours. Behaviour disturbances, 2 items were added: frequency and alterability of any symptoms. Can you adjust in routines? Cognition was involved, added 2 items that looked at cognitive fatigue was one of them, and the other one was difficulty in everyday workplace with your ordinary workplace activities and tasks. We looked at how stable the person's condition was and time since injury, whether they had unsettled relationships, and just picking up a new extra couple of diagnoses that we needed to do. So basically that's what's in the supplement. If you know the home care, it's plus. So when you write an intro item, it's a very complicated process, because obviously it has to be robust, and if you want it to be used in all jurisdictions and by people in all different countries with different languages, there are certain rules that intro follow. First of all, if it's already written in another instrument, use that instrument. So some of those items there were in the community mental health or the child youth instruments. They were able to just be brought across. The other thing is you do need the look back period, 3 days, 30 days, whatever. You need to define that. You have to decide what's included and excluded. As I said, we had the manual for the examples. You have to have the response set. And really, because I took responsibility for writing the speech language therapy item, which was very exciting, I have to say. You have to make sure that any assessor can easily tell the difference between this code, that code, or that code, or that code. Because once you have ambiguity, then they're all going to ring their educators and say, please explain. So you have to be clear that you can do that. And then obviously there's always the tension between everybody wants everything put in an instrument, yet everybody wants it as small as they possibly can make it. So you have to look at those. So this is just an example actually taken from our new president, Dr. John Hurdy's, where it is, you start off, he said, like, you have to have a clarifying statement. You can't just have the item, you've got to clarify exactly what it means. Then you have to write sort of like the precise concept. What are we actually talking about here? So this might be in, daily activities, but this item is about meal preparation. You have to say the time frame, you have to give examples, and then you have to write anchor words in the response set. And in the response set, this here is really, if you look at it, it's not really about the meal itself. It's about, could you do it yourself? How much I can do by myself. It's not about talking about whether you have carrots or sandwiches. So here's the difficulty speaking item that I took responsibility for. If anybody who knows the home care, LTCF, check, all the others, intro deals with a language problem, as in, do you understand? Can you make yourself understood? But there's not really an issue about dysarthria. And in this particular group, a lot of people have dysarthria. And we knew this when we decided that this would be one of the items. But you write the item and then you have to find out, does it work? And so this difficulty in speaking, the item is need for support, these are the specific words, including other persons, including assistive device due to impaired muscles, neurological conditions, e.g. slurred speech or slow speech or variable volume. And when the assessors have the coding response set, they need to be able to clarify whether the person has no problems, minimal, moderate, severe, or very severe. So then when Krista who will still be awake, I hope, went through and looked at this, how this item performed, we were able to see that just as we predicted from a clinical point of view and from the literature, that nearly half of the people, or over half of the people, don't have a problem at all, but many people do have this problem. And that what you really want to see is that it differentiates between people. So if everybody just fell into the mild category or the moderate category, it's no good to you. You want to have people falling into the different categories. And that's exactly what it does do. So for every single one of our new items that wasn't already in the data set, we had to go through this process to make sure the item worked. And here's the response set. You're probably not terribly interested unless you're an assessor, but it's about, you know, are you understood by unfamiliar individuals? And it just goes through the range of the people are, whether you're unfamiliar or familiar with the person, and how well, because we know with dysarthria, if you're familiar with the person, you're more likely to be able to understand what they have to say. Yet, if they're unfamiliar to you, you can think, what the heck, what is this person saying? So where are we with the milestones? Right down here, we're at the last bit in bold. Next week, all the science stuff and the outcome of the first pilot is going to be presented to the interRAI ISD. That's the scientific committee for scientific approval, and that will give the instrument an alpha status, which means it's good to go. You can test it in your country. We want more people to trial this, but it's not a confirmed instrument, but it is, you know, ready to go. And then by June 2026, everything will be all tidied up. And then we move into the post-project phase, where, as you know, all the other instruments have these embedded decision support properties. And until you have a bit of data, you can't actually write the caps and you can't write the outcome scales. So that action will be going on, and they'll be redefining and defining the analysis of the items, and doing some more implementation testing. And there's some research grade software available that can be used anywhere in the world, accessed from Canada, which leads me to my last slide, which says, are you interested in hearing more? Would you like to join this research? Would you like to implement this as a pilot in New Zealand? Because if you can, we will make it as easy as possible as we can for you if you have this client group that you're interested in. And if you're looking to be a new research study or something, we want to hear from you. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Brigette. I'm showing my ignorance a little bit about interRAI, but is there any capacity, given this age group, for asking questions about their strengths? Because a lot of the young ones, well, they've got a whole life to live with whatever acquired brain injury they've got. Because it often seems quite deficit-based questions, but
it often seems what, sorry?
Deficit-based, the questions.
I think that you're looking at a form and you're not talking to a trained assessor. So the form captures the information that is required, but a trained assessor is trained to have a conversation with a person and speak in a strength-based way. And you want to hear from that person and discuss what issues they have according to each of the items. But you still need to code where that person sits on that continuum. So if they need help, you need to know how much help they need. And if you have help, then, you know, what further down, you know, on the coding. If the person doesn't have a problem, then that's clearly a strength. So that's in the conversation with the person who's being assessed. I think that's, yeah, okay.
And Brigette, do you envisage that trained interRAI assessors do this assessment, or could it be sort of given it to psychologists or other people who do a concussion assessment? rather than just necessarily needing trained inter-RAI assessors?
Well, I think the thing that we're really talking about a supplement.
Mm-hmm.
So I think possibly in the future you could have, you could make more minimum information, pull that information out. But at the moment, the stakeholders all wanted to know everything that was in the home care, and they wanted to know these additional things. So until we kind of figure out what's redundant in that, because there will be some items that you think, well, we don't, once they look at the data, they can say we already have found out about this because of that item there, so that can go. Although I have to say, there's a big place for face validity. If you talk to clinicians and assessors, there are some items they want to see, even though they should already know the answer to that because of some of the other items. So in these early stages, we'll probably tolerate a little bit of redundancy until people are much more familiar to know what we can get out of the instrument.
Hi, Sarah Penner, I'm from Corrections. Just interested in your exclusions for people, because the things you excluded are often very associated with TBIs in particular, and just wondered what your thoughts are around the validity of using it, even if you have got someone who has conduct disorders or drug and alcohol. I mean, I know it can confound some of the
I thought someone would ask this question.
I'm good. I'm glad I'm helpful.
First of all, it's an alpha version, right? So when you're developing an alpha version, you try and make it as uncomplicated as possible and not having all these confounding variables. Because we've added in diagnoses, boosted up the diagnoses, I think to trial it, knowing that they're the people who have been excluded in the formation of the assessment, not necessarily excluded from the use of the assessment. So that's, give it a go is what I would say.
Thanks, Brigette. So is it the diagnosis that would trigger using the supplement?
Yeah.
Purely on diagnoses?
Yeah. It's about, like, we're wanting to know, well, at the moment, it's a response to a stakeholder group who said the ordinary home care instrument doesn't give us information about excessive naivety, for example, being involved in scams online, and also about needing extra resource, like supervision resource that you might not need if you didn't have a cognitive problem and were mobile and young, accessing the community, I mean.
I'm just wondering why you made the decision to put the supplement onto the HC that doesn't currently have supplements on it rather than the CHAR.
Well, actually,
I thought you'd have an answer.
That's because we don't use the CHAR much in New Zealand. If I was giving this presentation in Canada, where they use the CHAR a lot more, I would say, ta-da, do the original core CHAR, probably do the functional supplement, and then do this supplement. And as you know, add those all up and you've got the home care. So we just don't use the CHAR the way Canada does. A lot of possibilities there.
You've got lots of comments online, Brigette, which I'll probably print out for you. All very interesting. Loving to see the insights and the rigors of the development of an assessment item, and wondering if you could share the process for creating new inter-RAI items. It was very in-depth and interesting, great work, but a little bit more detail down here. Interesting to know your process on how you chose which items to include in the ABI. And I'll give you the rest. And what is there anything you could it could be used to validate against, which I think after you've got through the trial, you'd come up with something.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first thing is in what was going to be included. First of all, the co-partners on this, the HERO, the Ontario Head Injury Rehab, they're all clinician experts. So they're largely clinicians who work with people with a brain injury every day as a service provider. And then, of course, the stakeholder groups. So they work with the stakeholder groups, was able to then bring in what are the other items that people wanted to add. And then there was, I think, I can't remember the list, but there was like 3 lots of stakeholder events where they were refined each time before it went back to the stakeholders. So that's how the items were identified in the first place. Plus, there was a literature review in the beginning and a scan of all the other instruments that were available. And the last bit, what was that last question, Karen?
Yeah, it's a validity.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Is there any instruments that could be validated against them in
well,
relation to particular outcomes?
The focus at the moment is validating each item rather than the total, because what we do need to do is have the instrument trialled a bit more so that we're collecting the data. As I said, that's how you can't develop the clinical, well, we used to call them clinical assessment protocols, but the collaborative action plans or the outcome measures until you have more data. And then that then can be validated, because we all know interRAI is not the form, interRAI is the outputs. Yeah. A little bit of a message there.
Thanks, Brigette. There's a couple more questions, but we are out of time. So if those people talk to Brigette later, and I'll thank
you very
Brigette
much.
for your talk.